Okay, so we've made it to our topic 11 part of the review. This is our most recent chapter. Number 41, researchers wanted to identify variables connected to newborns' birth weights. Determine if each variable is a categorical variable, quantitative variable, or neither. So just a reminder, categorical variable is when the responses you get could be put into categories. Quantitative data, the responses you get back would be numeric in nature, so you could do math with them. You could find statistics, or neither. So a mother's age would be numeric numbers you would get back. So that would be a quantitative variable. The mother's race, Caucasian, African American, Asian, etc. These are not number answers. These are categories. So this would be a categorical variable. The baby's weight in pounds. So these are numeric responses we would be getting. We could find the mean, the median, the standard deviation, all that fun stuff. So that would be considered a quantitative variable. And then the baby's gender, that is a category, so categorical. All right, so number 42. During a baseball game, every spectator placed his or her ticket stub into one of several containers. After the game, the coach chose 10 people to march in the sportsmanship parade. What are the population and sample in this situation? So we have some options to choose from. The 10 people to march in the sportsmanship parade, the coach, the ticket stubs, the baseball game spectators. So the population is going to be um, everybody, and we're choosing a smaller group of that to represent everybody. So in this case, every spectator placed his or her ticket stub into one of several containers. So every spectator, that's going to be our population. So option or letter D, the baseball game spectators, that's our population. So they put their ticket stubs into one of several containers. After the game, the coach chose 10 people to march in the parade. These 10 people are the ones that were chosen from the population. So, letter A right here, the 10 people to march in the sportsmanship parade, that is the sample chosen from the larger population. All right, number 43. A list of students is randomly generated from the school database. Information for every student is entered into the database, and each student has an equally likely chance of being selected. The students selected are asked how much time they spend on household chores each week. What type of study is being conducted? So just a reminder, we have three types of studies. We have a sample survey. We have an experiment. And observational. So when it says what type of study, we want to choose from one of these three. These are three different ways that we can collect information on whatever statistical question we are trying to answer. So in this example, is this an example of a sample survey, an experiment, or are we observing to collect data? So every student is entered into the database. Each student has an equally likely chance of being selected. The students selected are asked how much time they spend on household chores each week. So this is a sample survey. So that is the type of study that we are doing. we have taken a sample of the larger population and asked them a specific question, and we can collect that data. All right, number 44. The data to the right were collected from all race participants to answer the question. What is the average age of runners in the Fall Harvest 5K? Does this histogram represent data related to a parameter or statistic? So we do want to remember some vocab here, parameter versus statistic. So a parameter is when the data we're collecting or the thing that we're measuring is about the entire population. Statistic is when we take a sample of the population and we collect, we measure something from just the sample, which then represents the larger population. So to answer this question, we want to think about what is this data from? Is this data from the entire population or is this data from a sample? So the data to the right were collected from all race participants. What's the average age of runners in the fall? So they didn't ask a small sample of the participants, they asked every single race participant. So that's going to make this a parameter. And then we can just write out the reason why. The quantity measuring, we're measuring something about the entire population. So just remember, if it's information about the entire population, in this case, every race participant was asked a question, that data is a parameter. If we had, let's say, asked every fifth runner the question, that would be a sample. It would be a smaller group to represent all of the runners. That would be a statistic. All right, last question on this page. Number 45, to investigate a community's reading habits, a newspaper conducts a poll from a table near the exit of a science building. What is the sampling method? Does the sampling method have any bias? So the type of study that we're doing is a sample survey of some kind, and there are different types of, or different ways to do a sample survey. There's different methods. You have, just for example, stratified, cluster, convenience, self-selected, I'm blinking, systematic would be another one. So what's happening here is the newspaper is setting up a table outside of a building and just asking people as they exit. So this would be considered convenience sampling. They just kind of sat themselves down and asked the people that were walking past them outside of this science building. So does the sampling method have any bias? So convenience sampling is one of the ones that can produce bias in our data. Convenience and self-selected sampling methods, those are the two to look out for that have a higher risk of being biased. So in this case, even though it is convenience sampling, would we have a high risk of bias? So one, there's no randomization here. We're not randomly asking people that exit. The more randomized something is, the less bias that there is. So let's just make a note that there is no randomization. There we go. So that makes things more biased if there's no randomization. And then if we just consider this, so we're sitting outside of a science building. So who's in the science building? And this is definitely being a little stereotypical, but do we think that people that are in science buildings in general have reading habits that might be similar. Maybe these people are likely to read more. Maybe as a group, these people are likely to read less. So we would say that, yeah, there is some bias. Does the sampling method have any bias? Yes. And again, like we just said, we're outside of a science building. The people out entering and exiting that building might have similar reading habits. But this is the other thing is that we have no randomization in how we're collecting the data.